Tonight, Iran rages. Protests against the regime intensify. Iran clamps down on demonstrators, cutting off internet throughout the country.
And November bound. The GOP unveils the party's midterm strategy.
Plus, NASA set to smash a spacecraft into an asteroid's moon tonight.
Before beginning a new era in spaceflight, launching the Mega Moon rocket to begin the ARTEMIS exploration project.
All this and more on Faith Nation.
Protests intensify in Iran. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Matt Gelka.
And I'm Abigail Robertson. A growing wave of defiance in Iran and beyond as thousands fled the streets of Tehran for the 9th day, with protests ignited over the death of a 22-year-old woman.
Iran's morality police arrested Mahsa Amini for allegedly not properly wearing the hijab headscarf. She suspiciously died in their custody shortly afterwards. As protests show no signs of letting up, the Islamic regime is cracking down. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us now with the latest. Caitlin, how is the government trying to silence those demonstrators?
Matt, Abigail, they're using a two-pronged approach of force and repression. Iranian police are in the streets trying to stop the protests. At least 41 people have been killed since the demonstrations began. And the regime has pulled the plug on the web and social media nationwide, a tactic they've seen success with before.
The pattern has been when the Iranian people get fed up and they take to the streets to protest the regime's policies, immediately after we see the regime use live ammunition against protesters, but also the regime cuts internet access.
The Iranian government shut off global internet access Wednesday for almost 80 million of its citizens. Still, outrage over the death of Mahsa Amini has only expanded. Iranian officials claim the 22-year-old died due to underlying health issues, but her family says that's not true. Now, thousands of brave Iranians continue to protest in her name, in some cases even driving back Iranian security forces. Women in acts of defiance burning their hijab or headscarves and cutting their hair. Across the globe, other protests erupting in solidarity.
I'm cutting my hair because many of my sisters in Iran, they gonna die.
President Biden himself weighed in last week at the United Nations.
We stand with the brave citizens and the brave women of Iran who right now are demonstrating to secure their basic rights.
The U.S. Treasury Department announced it would take action to expand internet services in Iran in an effort to support the free flow of information. Secretary of State Antony Blinken tweeting that a general license has been issued to provide the Iranian citizens greater access to digital communications. Elon Musk responding with, quote, activating Starlink.
Internet obviously is very important when protesters are trying to organize and also when they're trying to share footage with the outside world of what's going on. So Elon Musk giving Starlink to Iran would be a true game changer for the Iranian people, and I hope he does it.
According to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Starlink is in fact now active in Iran. In order for the satellite internet service to actually benefit the Iranian people, terminals need to be distributed on the ground. While that's something the Iranian government certainly would not support, it's considered a surmountable challenge. Abigail, Matt.
Here with us now is Behnam Ben Taleblu, Senior Fellow with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, or FDD. Behnam, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Faith Nation. So we'll just get right to it. If Elon Musk is able to get Starlink's satellite-based internet up and running enough to provide major internet services to Iran, how much of a game changer could that really be?
Well, pleasure to be with you both. In essence, satellite communication, satellite internet, and basically fostering the ability of Iranians to communicate better with one another inside country, as well as to share their messages, stories, as well as their plight with members of the international community, would be a game changer, would literally be a revolution, because it's not just Iranians that are suffering on the streets. It's Iranians that are suffering in cyberspace as well because they can't get their message out and because the regime is using an internet blackout, sometimes localized and sometimes nationwide, to prevent the Iranian people's plight from being heard by members of the international community. So if Starlink, both on the software side and hardware side, is set up and operational, it would be a game changer.
And Bedham, as the Iranian regime continues its crackdown on protesters, the White House is preparing to approve the transfer of $7 billion to Iran in exchange for the release of U.S. hostages. Could that incentivize the kidnapping of U.S. citizens?
You know, there's been a lot of issues with the Biden administration's Iran policy and its, potential to want to wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and continue to do diplomacy with the Islamic Republic and keep the door open for the resurrection of a fatally flawed nuclear deal, as well as pave the way for things that you mentioned, which could be paying essentially what amounts to ransom for the return of hostages, would only incentivize further hostage taking, as well as the export of terrorism, as well as partaking in terrorism, are threats that are as old as the Islamic Republic itself, which emanate from Iran. So these are things that would be akin to shooting yourself in the foot morally and strategically.
Ben, I mean, you just sort of alluded to it, but is the U.S. sending mixed messages here on securing an Iran deal, and how is Iran reading them?
Well, ultimately, the message that the U.S. needs to understand and calibrate and fix and course correct is the message sent by itself, particularly itself over time. You know, the last time there was a Democratic administration and major street protests in Iran, known as the Green Movement, in response to the stolen election of 2009, there were, again, millions of Iranians out into the streets, and Washington failed to heed their call. And indeed, then you did have the death of a young Iranian female on the streets, murdered at the hands of the cold blood of this regime. And fast forward many years later, you literally have quite again the same thing. And again, Washington's overriding interest, both then and now, seems to be keeping the door open for nuclear diplomacy with the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism. Again, that's a strategic and moral mistake, and one that can and should be fixed.
Yeah. Well, Bedham, we're going to have to leave it there tonight, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now to Florida, where a Category 4 storm surge and Category 1 or 2 landfall threat is looming over the Sunshine State. Ian is expected to hit Florida this week with heavy rains, high winds, and flooding. Yeah, this is the latest major storm in just the last week after Hurricane Fiona slammed Puerto Rico and a powerful typhoon lashed the Philippines. George Thomas has the details.
From the Panhandle,
just make sure I'm self-sufficient for a while because I know electricity is going to go out,
to Miami.
We just tell our staff and all our customers, have water, have food, treat it like it's coming.
Floridians not taking any chances ahead of Ian's arrival.
Be prepared now. Take a look at your plans, know where you're going to go, and how to keep your family safe.
With the looming threat of Ian to the Sunshine State, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis activating some 2,500 National Guardsmen and declaring a state of emergency.
It's important to point out to folks that the path of this is still uncertain. The impacts will be broad throughout the state of Florida.
Authorities telling residents to expect heavy rains across the state with high winds and storm surge.
We could see a situation where we have Cat 4 storm surge and potentially a Cat 1 or 2 hurricane landfall.
And across the Pacific. This was the scene in northern Philippines as the most powerful typhoon this year slammed into the country over the weekend, knocking out power in 2 entire provinces, causing widespread flooding, forcing officials to suspend classes and government work in the capital and other areas, and leaving at least 6 dead, including 5 rescuers who were using a boat to help people trapped by floodwaters. Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. calling them heroes and saying preparation for storms is very important. And in Puerto Rico, cleanup efforts continue a week after Hurricane Fiona made landfall. Nearly 1.5 million people still without electricity.
My home doesn't have any electricity. I don't have any water.
Disaster teams from Operation Blessing have been on the ground delivering food and water. They visited several communities and churches, distributing rechargeable solar lamps and aquatabs. The tablets purify water, giving residents clean water to drink and cook with.
That is exactly what we need now in this time where there are so many people with fear and anxiety. We feel blessed that we have Operation Blessing here because we know their heart.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Thanks, George. Well, coming up, Republicans unveil a midterm strategy, and we'll look into why Democrats are facing some strong headwinds heading into November. Democrats are facing new headwinds in a new poll going into the midterm elections. Just 39% approve of the job President Joe Biden is doing in a new ABC Washington Post poll, while 53% disapprove. That could indicate big losses for the Democrats this fall.
The poll comes as congressional Republicans have released their own agenda for what they would do if they retake the majority. I traveled with our CBN News team to Washington County, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, where Republican leaders unveiled a plan they say shows voters why they should choose the GOP in November.
We've created a commitment to America.
Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy told a packed House that Republicans have the blueprint for the country. He laid out a platform that includes securing the southern border, reeling in inflation, and bringing down crime rates. New polling from ABC and the Washington Post has 84% of people calling the economy a top issue in their congressional vote.
The most important thing is cost of living to the American public. This runaway inflation that the Democrats have caused, making gas prices so high. I mean, the American public, no matter where you are, you're asking, can you afford it?
Another pillar is a commitment to a parental bill of rights, as education is expected to be a potential deciding issue.
I think parents have just said enough is enough. We want to be active. We want an active seat at the table. We want a true partnership with our school systems.
While the roadmap might be light on solid proposals, one thing appears clear. If Republicans take control of the House, there will be investigations.
We're big boys and girls. We can handle the truth. Give us the facts. So we are committed to doing the investigations that need to be done. After all, that is part of our constitutional duty.
Polls suggest Republicans are in good position to take back control of at least the House chamber. Democrats use the Republican rollout to punch back by zeroing in on issues they see as winners for their side.
That's a thin series of policy goals with little or no detail that he says Republicans are going to pursue if they regain control of the Congress. Here's a few of the things we didn't hear. We didn't hear him mention the right to choose.
The agenda did not address the abortion issue directly, only making a promise to protect the unborn. Republicans are seemingly split on whether to propose federal abortion legislation or leave it entirely up to the states. Democrats hope to make it the deciding issue in November.
If Republicans win control of the Congress, abortion will be banned.
The commitment to America is a throwback to 1994's Contract with America, the brainchild of former House Speaker Newt Gingrich that propelled Republicans to majorities in both chambers almost 3 decades ago. Now, one policy proposal that McCarthy did promise was to stop the IRS from hiring 87,000 new agents on day one if the GOP gets control of Congress. That was a provision of a bill passed this past summer. Now, for more on this, we don't have an IRS agent, but we do have Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us on Faith Nation tonight. So what's your take on the Republican Party platform heading into the midterms? Does the GOP have a winning strategy by focusing on workers and the economy like we heard from the Commitment to America?
Well, that's the winning strategy. I'm just not really sure it matters all that much. Now, I want to be clear. I think Republicans are still set up to do well. I just don't think there were a lot of voters that were sitting around waiting for Republicans to unveil a plan. I think that voters are upset with the current direction of the country, the current state of the economy, and they're ready to vote out Democrats or send a message to President Biden. You know, when we go back to 1994 and that contract with America, it was unveiled about 6 weeks before the election, so about at this point. But Republicans were already set up to do very well. We already knew a wave was building at this point. That wasn't, a critical. It wasn't preventing Republicans from doing well in that election. And just like this time, I don't think it would if they hadn't unveiled it, I don't think it would have prevented Republicans from doing well because voters are upset about the direction of the country.
And Nathan, Democrats are facing some serious headwinds going into the midterms, namely the president and his plummeting poll numbers. So is President Biden an asset or a problem for Democrats right now?
Well, he's a net liability for Democrats. I think with this latest poll, I think we'll see what it is. I mean, this is the worst we've seen President Biden's job rating in a little while. His job approval rating overall, when you look at the average of polls, he's actually been doing 3 to 4 points better. So we'll see if this poll by ABC News Washington Post is an outlier, or maybe it's the beginning of a new trend where we'll see Biden's job rating start to go down even further. And that would be it would hurt Democratic chances even more if he's not getting more popular.
Well, Democrats have Biden's approvals numbers, and Republicans have a challenge of their own with, well, who else? Former President Trump. Congresswoman Liz Cheney says she won't be a Republican if Trump's the 2024 nominee. So do you see other Republicans doing that same thing, switching parties? And how much of a problem do you think that will be for the GOP heading into November?
Well, when I saw this Cheney's comments in this interview, I thought there are a lot of Republicans who say, "Good, right? Like, go, just leave," because I think she is still in the very small minority of Republicans who would go that far. But it's not surprising. But President Trump, when we look ahead to 2024, he is not in as strong of a position among Republicans as what he was 6 months or 12 months ago. I think there are Republicans looking for an alternative to make sure that they can win the White House, because if they see Trump, they may have liked what he's done as president, but if they see him as a liability to preventing the Republicans from getting the White House back in 2024, they're going to start to look for other options.
Well, Nathan, thank you so much as always, and keep your eye out for the IRS, huh?
That's right, always.
Well, coming up, why is NASA purposely crashing into an asteroid tonight? Find out next. The Big Crash, a potentially Earth-saving maneuver. NASA's double asteroid redirection test called DART, set for tonight. That's when NASA will smash a small spacecraft into an asteroid's moon. But no need to fear. An asteroid is not heading towards Earth. NASA said it's the world's first test for defending the planet in case an asteroid does head near Earth in the future.
Here with us now is Betsy Congdon, NASA's DART Project Mechanical Systems Engineer. Betsy, thank you so much for joining us on Faith Nation. We'll start here. The question on everybody's mind, we know this asteroid poses no danger to Earth now, but is there any fear that something could go wrong by smashing a spacecraft into it and cause it to veer towards Earth?
There's no way that this asteroid will go towards Earth, either with our impact or anything else.
So look, we've all seen the movie, right? Ben Affleck, Bruce Willis, we've all seen that one. What are you expecting to happen tonight? Is it going to be like how it plays out in the science fiction shows?
This mission is a little different than the science fiction shows. We're going to be taking the DART spacecraft and impacting Dimorphos, which is a asteroid that's about 160 meters, so pretty big, but not too big. It's kind of the size of the pyramids of Giza, if you think about it. The spacecraft itself is kind of the size of a vending machine, and it's just going to nudge it just a little bit. It's going to stay intact and just move a little bit.
Well, to me, throwing a vending machine at the pyramids does sound like throwing a smaller object at a bigger one. So that all being said, what are you all hoping to learn from this test?
There's a lot that we're planning on learning from this test. First of all, this is NASA's first planetary defense mission. And this is really important that right now there are no asteroids. There's nothing endangering Earth. But if there were to be one, we want to be ready. And so that's the key with this test. The other thing is we're going to learn a lot about Dimorphos, the asteroid that we're hitting. There's a lot that we don't know about it. We don't know its shape. We don't really know what it's made of. And by hitting it and observing how we change it, we'll actually learn a lot about the asteroid itself.
Obviously, this is a very complex mission. How much planning goes into something like this?
This took years and years of planning, as well as hundreds of thousands of people to make this successful. But it did take all those people, and now we're ready for impact tonight.
So kind of take me through it. If this had to be a real live test, how much warning are we talking about from launch to getting to the asteroid? Are we talking days, weeks, months? How long does it take?
This mission took a couple of years to get together and be ready for launch. Obviously, we're setting ourselves up so that we could be in a better position in the future. And one of the key parts of planetary defense in general is just understanding all of the asteroids and all of the things in the solar system. And so that's another key aspect of NASA's planetary defense mission.
Now, there's no way anybody on Earth is going to be able to see anything, like we see shooting stars or comets or anything like that. We're not going to be able to see anything, are we?
You're not going to be able to see the impact with the naked eye, but I really encourage your viewers to go and watch on NASA TV tonight. The impact is at 7:14 p.m. Eastern, but there will be live coverage starting a couple hours earlier. And watch along with us about all the things that are going on with the spacecraft. And we're going to be looking into mission control and seeing how all that's going.
Now, I'm going to use a really technical term here, space junk. Is there anything like that could happen after the impact? Are we talking about pieces of the asteroid or pieces of the rocket flying around space?
So the impact, we actually hope will cause a little bit of ejecta. It won't be anywhere near us or anything like that. It'll just be, in the Dimorphos system. But if, when the spacecraft goes in and hits, we get stuff coming off the back of the asteroid, it actually acts like a little thruster. And so the spacecraft will actually move the asteroid a little bit more if there is the stuff that comes off. And we expect there to be a little bit, but that's one of the things we're going to go and learn.
And finally and really quickly, I think people are wondering, what is the likelihood that this will actually have to be used in the real world? I mean, basically, what's the threat to Earth right now?
Right now is very low threat to Earth. This is a very unlikely event, but the goal of this is to be ready for it, because obviously if it were to happen, it would be very bad, but there's a very low likelihood it would happen.
Well, Betsy Congdon, thank you so much and good luck with the test.
Thank you.
Well, still ahead, more NASA news. Hurricane Ian delaying a new chapter in space exploration. Next. Finally tonight, Hurricane Ian now barreling towards Florida, officially delaying the dawn of a new era in spaceflight.
Yeah, NASA's plans to launch its mega moon rocket tomorrow now scrubbed. NASA rolling its Artemis 1 rocket back to the massive vehicle assembly building to shield against hurricane-force winds. If it ever does get off the ground, the Space Launch System will carry the Orion spacecraft 40,000 miles beyond the moon, paving the way for humans to go to the moon and eventually, maybe, to Mars. The flight also sets the stage for the first woman and first person of color to set foot on the moon. Hopefully, they can get that mission done soon. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight on Faith Nation.
We'll see you tomorrow.